If you're a parent caught in the chaos of youth sports, the pressure, the politics, the excitement, you're not alone. This is Be Valiant.
Welcome to another episode of Be Valiant. I'm your host, Todd Merkow, the CEO and founder of Valiant Sports Society. I'm glad to have you for another episode. I've got a longtime friend of mine joining us today. I'm really excited to have him. As I always say, I think I got another great episode for you. So I think you're going to enjoy this. This guest is a former collegiate baseball player, played at Arizona State University, when Arizona State University was year in and year out at the top of collegiate NCAA baseball. He actually made a trip to the College World Series, which I very much envy, losing in the championship game to USC of all teams from the same conference, but had a great collegiate run. He played 6 years in pro ball, making it as high as AAA, both for the Tampa Rays, and the Texas Rangers, where he spent a couple years in their organization. He grew up as a multi-sport athlete. We're going to talk about that and what that meant to his career. But more importantly, one of the main reasons why we have him on here is he is an entrepreneur, and this is kind of in the area of where I met him, working on a startup, not particularly this one, but I think things evolved. He is CEO and founder of SportsForce, that you could see at sportsforce.io. It is a platform for youth athletes and their families to help the recruiting process. We're going to talk about what that's all about, but he's been doing that for a number of years now, quite successfully, and is looking to grow it even further. So I think you'll really like the perspective and the experience and the data in particular that he's collected by talking with athletes, mostly baseball players, through all of this. But we're going to get into that. My guest today is Andrew Beinbrink. Welcome, Andrew.
Todd, good to have me. Excited to talk about this. I've listened to a couple of your episodes, and I think the mission, the vision is spot on and ideal timing for what's going on right now within youth, high school, and college sports.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's start with kind of just where I like to set the table, and because of your sports background, your playing background, let's talk about your youth days. Tell us about those years and what sports you were playing and, how you found your way into baseball ultimately.
Sure. So yeah, sports always been a huge part of my life. I think it was having an older brother. I grew up playing soccer, football, baseball, basketball, organized for 1 year, played tennis, during the summers. Went body surfing, played golf, just was kind of all things sports. Grew up on a street where we would play, in the front yard, the backyard, in the park, wherever. And it was always just competing at whatever it was. And so to me, sports is like a classroom that I got for myself to learn about myself, but I see it also for young men and women to learn more about their own perseverance, teamwork, ability to overcome adversity. I mean, I could go on and on, but yeah, big believer in sports as a powerful classroom.
You grew up in Southern California, right?
I did, San Diego.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, it's interesting as you're describing that, and you can go a little deeper here in a second, but very similar. And we've got an age difference. Anybody watching on YouTube, you can see that by matter of fact. I'm younger than him by many years. No, I'm kidding. I'm older by a decade or two maybe, and very similar experience. Multi-sport, playing with your friends, going to the beach. I mean, I had all of that inside of my experiences. We didn't stick to one sport all the time, every day of every hour of every day of the year. That just wasn't the case. I think we were very fortunate growing up in Southern California in that way that we had that ability, but I'm not sure that kids today have that luxury, even in Southern California, when they get into a competitive environment, whether it be baseball, which you probably know a lot of, plus the other sports. I mean, because of the warm weather states, I think they're being taken advantage of probably more than anybody in the for-profit businesses that are getting their hands in creating things and probably that they shouldn't be. And we don't need to go there right now, but my point is that you experienced everything. So where were you as far as competitive sports, and not necessarily at the highest level, but what were
Sure.
you playing in leagues growing up? All of
Yeah,
that you noticed? You
the
noted?
biggest ones were baseball and soccer that I
Okay.
was playing, on the most competitive kind of club teams at younger ages. And football wasn't until high school. Tennis was just during the summer, visiting family in New York. And then golf and pickup basketball, that was for fun, except for 1 year of organized basketball in the eighth grade.
So when did you start focusing on baseball? Did it ever become specialized for you, or were you playing soccer until your senior year of high school?
It was specialized 2 years of high school. So freshman year, I played soccer, baseball, then actually soccer, baseball, football, and actually sophomore year also played football. So actually, it was only specialized for 1 year, my junior year. And Actually, no, that's not the case. So let me rewind the clock. So I was specialized for baseball 1 year, sophomore year. Um, every other year, I was playing at least two sports. And then junior year, senior year, I played football, soccer, and baseball, back to back seasons.
Okay.
So and I was still playing baseball. Sometimes I'd play on like a weekend scout league team in the fall, just here and there during my junior and senior year.
Yep.
But yeah, I to me having the balance and having a break from baseball was huge.
Yeah.
Mentally, baseball can just grind you out. But we're seeing this, across because we've worked with athletes in over 10 different sports, both on the boys and the girls side. Um, the explosion of club team sports at younger and younger ages has really happened in the last 10 to 15 years, and it's gotten out of control. And we can go deeper into that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But let me ask you a question. I want to draw a correlation here. So, as an athlete, and you're playing all these sports, you play at a very high level collegiately at Arizona State University. You go play pro ball. What did all of those sports, soccer, football in particular, basketball, heck, I would even throw body surfing into this. What did all that mean to the athlete you became as a baseball player? Please tell the parents how important that
Yeah,
was, I'm assuming.
yeah, no, I would say first, just the balance and the break was a big deal for my body and for my mental game as well. I think the other thing is sports like like tennis and basketball. I was learning things in terms of timing and how to use my body that I think I was then able to apply in baseball. And also footwork. As an infielder, I had to be able to move with kind of be fleet of foot because I played a lot of different positions up the middle as a middle infielder through high school. So definitely basketball and soccer were huge there. And then just from a speed and explosiveness standpoint, to be able to, home to first, you know, I had a bunch of triples while I was in college and professional baseball. And I think it all can feed into each other with the right approach.
Did anybody around you treat sports as a pathway or, early on, or was this just happening naturally? And then, one day the scouts start looking at you, collegiately scouts are looking at you, and you end up at Arizona State. Like, how does that pathway move, and what kind of internal pressures, if any, are you feeling at home?
Yeah, there was definitely, I think in Southern California, there was a clear pathway to move on to play professional baseball coming out of high school with a lot of players getting drafted professionally out of high school. In terms of the pressure, I went to a high school where we had players that had signed professionally. So I do think that there was, or I was putting pressure on myself to perform and, try to make varsity and make an impact. I really wasn't looking at college baseball um, seriously because the recruiting process was later until end of sophomore, like summer before junior year, is when there were players older than us, starting to get recruited, and we started hearing more and more about that. But pro baseball was always Kind of like even when I was a little kid playing t-ball, that was always the dream to play Major League Baseball.
Yeah. So when you're in high school, are you getting looked at from a pro perspective and hitting the draft boards? Or are you dealing with, you must be, because with Arizona State hitting that level, you must have had this decision brought to you, whether to go pro after high school or college. What was that whole experience like?
Yeah, so I was drafted by the Red Sox out of high school, decided to go um, to Arizona State, take the scholarship there, and I'll share more about that. But yeah, there's way more for elite, very elite back then. There was a lot more pro scouts coming out to see high school players than there are now. And there were very few college coaches coming out to see players in person because they'd use like the summer or the fall to see players play, and because they're playing their own season during the high school.
Yeah. And so you make this decision now. How does this all come about? And how are your parents involved in everything that's going on?
I would say, my dad played college lacrosse at the Naval Academy, so he had no clue about baseball. My parents were divorced, so, and my mom wasn't really into the sports scene. So we were kind of flying blind around how this recruiting and professional baseball opportunity would come to be. This is at the high school age. And I was fortunate to make the area code team. I was at the right place at the right time where hundreds of college coaches were at. This was August before my senior year. And from there, I just blew up in terms of, we'll call it recognition, notoriety, and interest. But that's very different than the world now, where there's a showcase or a tournament. It seems like every weekend throughout the summer and the fall, almost year round, except for the high school season.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about, so your mom is kind of not really managing the process, it sounds like. Sounds like maybe both parents really aren't. You're just kind of going to the parks, going to the fields, doing whatever you do. How are your parents truly involved in all of this with you? Are they going to practices? What are they doing at games? What's all that look like? What's it like at home, pressure-wise, if
Sure.
any?
Yeah, I would say my dad was much more hands-on. He was an officer in the Navy. He was a captain in the Navy throughout most of my high school period. And with his sports background, he tried to be as hands-on and supportive. But candidly, as a young man, we just started butting heads. It was kind of, I felt like I was being told what to do way too often. And I'm trying to like figure out who I am as a young man, pushing boundaries, trying to, manage my own time and be trusted and all of those things. And so we did have some real heart to hearts, and it really came to a head like sophomore year. I'm on varsity. I'm struggling at the beginning of the season, and I feel like A, I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself. B, I felt like my dad was putting a lot of pressure on me, and I can remember just being in tears in my bedroom and asking him, "Dad, I need you to step back. I need you to give me the space to be able to play the game." Um, Imagine our baseball field, we had this closed in backstop, which was really close, not a normal baseball backstop. And he'd be right behind home plate, trying to cheer me on. But, I didn't want to hear my dad saying, drive the ball, Rue, or it just
Yeah.
it's already the most difficult thing to do in the world, hit a baseball. To hear your parent over your shoulder chirping at you was just, so I just told him flat out, you know, again in tears, I just said, Dad, I need you to watch the game either down the line, right field line where other parents watch the game, or just don't come to my games anymore.
Wow. I wish more kids had the strength to do that today, right? I mean, I'm sure you've seen it plenty. We've all seen it where the parents are just hovering and that's what they do and they don't care. They're not going to stop. And if there's one thing I wish I can get more out of or amplify more, is telling kids it's okay to tell your parents what you want. Meaning if you don't want them in your ear, and I have a feeling I understand the backstop you're talking about, the old schools where kind of had the overhang over home plate
Yep.
almost. Yeah, so you're really on top of it. And oh my God, I can only imagine what that felt like to have. I mean, the umpire is probably, he's as close as the umpire to you almost.
It's pretty, it's really
Yeah,
close.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just say for young men and women, teenagers, the journey that you go on trying to build your own identity and find your own voice. And I think that path is, how do you ask your parents what are the best ways that they can support you, and be able to communicate that, as opposed to shutting down emotionally, getting all dysregulated in your nervous system, and then trying to play with that pressure. Like, you're already trying to do something, which is be competitive at a sport. If you feel as though your parents are, although they might have the great intentions, if it's not supporting you, um, then try to ask for what does, and how they can support you. And a lot of it's usually, and we tell this to parents all the time, creating that space. It's difficult for a young man or young woman to step up if there's no room for them to step up. And so being able to take a step back allows them to step up.
Yeah, there's a podcast that I did with a guest, Sky Eddy, and she is very involved in the soccer community and talks to soccer parents. And one of the things that she was talking about with her own daughter, Callie, was that Callie came to her and said, "Mom, I can hear you, and I don't want to hear you." And all she was really doing was encouraging maybe the goalkeeper on their team, because she was a goalkeeper, and she just told her, "I don't really want to hear your voice while I'm playing." So Sky talks about how she stepped away, and sometimes she wouldn't even go to games. She gave her more freedom. As we've talked about many times on this podcast, from Sydney's third episode of Be Valiant, she talked about my daughter, my youngest daughter, the soccer player, said to me, Dad, it would have been okay if you just didn't go to as many games. And I thought, I never thought about it that way. And I think, I want to emphasize this point, because to the parents that are listening at home, it is really critical. And I'm sure when I say this, Andrew, you're going to have more to add. It is really critical to empower your kids. I want to empower you to make the right decisions, but you need to transfer that to your kids. Your kids need to be able to make the right decisions, and they won't make those right decisions if you don't empower them to make those decisions. And it's really critical that you find out what your kids want, because sometimes they don't want you at the game, and that's okay. Sometimes they don't want to hear you encourage them, and that's okay. You need to honor what your kids want. So, I'll let you get a word on this one.
Yeah, there's a series of certain questions that you can ask to kind of temperature check where your son or daughter, is in the process. One of those things is just a simple question is, what would it look like, or what would be the best way that I can support you? And that's just in general, just a good kind of open-ended question. Another one is, if they have a bad game or bad performance, not try to be their cheerleader. Like, let them own kind of that failure, and let them be able to sit with it, and not try to candy coat it as a parent, worried that your kids are going to go down a spiral of emotion and whatnot. And then the other thing is, yeah, try to, I would say, watch as a supportive and encouraging parent, and maintain your own emotions, as a fan, to be able to stay a little bit more even keel, because sports is already engineered to be super emotional, and just do your best to remain positive, is another big deal, because this game, sports are just going to challenge all of your emotions. As I say, it's a spiritual journey, and your faith, I'm not talking religion, I'm just saying your faith will be tested, your ability to believe in oneself.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's what sports is, right? I mean, at the core of all of this, we're, as an athlete at any level, you can be in Little League, you can be at bat in the College World Series and the championship game. It is a test of our mind, our body, and our spirit at all times. And to understand that, and to go through all of the different variations of what is going to happen throughout your mind, your body, your soul, for that matter, I think is really critical. And to then add your parents' voice on top of it is enough of a weight that sometimes kids just don't need to hear. I mean, there's a lot of noise from a lot of places, but you kind of said it. Positive guidance sometimes isn't even a good voice. And again, going back to some past podcasts, some guests have reiterated those same words. Okay, so let's navigate through your career. Let's stay on this. So how does Arizona State signing come about? Talk about going into college, what it meant as a freshman, your first year, and what those 4 years were like before you got drafted again, and or maybe you were three, I don't remember, but and then you go
Sure.
into pro ball.
Yeah, there's one point I want to make before we jump into that is there was a study that was done. This is CIF, basically California Interscholastic Federation, did a study and they identified three reasons why high school athletes play sports. Three core reasons. One is it's fun. Two, it's with their friends. Three, they get to be able to get feedback on how well they performed. And so I think parents need to keep that in mind. And athletes listening here, like if you're not finding ways to have fun, finding ways to connect with your teammates, and then look at competitiveness and the feedback that the sport gives you as just feedback, and that you will fail, and that you should be encouraged, to learn and fail and improve. And that's the competitiveness that gets built through sport. So as I transition, Todd, do you want me to jump into kind of
Well, wait,
college
let
ball?
me, yeah, I do, but I want to reiterate your point. Fun, friends, and feedback. 3 F's, according to Andrew Beinbrink. Fun, friends, and feedback. Parents, listen to it, put it in your head. Fun, friends, and feedback. Really critical, because it's not D1 scholarship, drafted in the pros. It's fun, friends, and feedback. If you worry about those three things, the rest takes care of itself. Right?
Spot on,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So I wanted to just reiterate. Yeah. So let's talk about, you go now, you make the move into Arizona State. Fantastic historical baseball program. I mean, very strong this today too, as we sit here and talk. Talk about what that transition as a high school senior moving into college baseball and what that meant moving away and everything that goes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was dead set on moving away for college. I did not want to be kind of in the, we'll say, in the footsteps or in earshot of, my parents. I just wanted to kind of create my own life and really become my own man. And so Arizona State got a scholarship to go there. Really, the choice I made between Arizona State, Stanford, and U of A were the three schools at the end of the recruiting process. I felt that Arizona State, the coaching staff, and everything, we'd have the best chance and the opportunity to win a national championship. So I came from a strong high school program. I was used to winning, and really that was kind of the reason to forego the professional baseball opportunity, was to go to Omaha and win a national championship. So fast forward, I go to Arizona State, and I also wanted to get as ideally playing time as early as I possibly could. And they had a new coach, new recruiting, first recruiting class. So I was going to be part of like this whole new era, the Pat Murphy era. Pat Murphy's now the Brewers manager for the major league team. And so I go to ASU. Also, ASU fit the academic major that I wanted, which was business with a focus on small business entrepreneurship. So it really had all of the pieces that I needed for the best fit for me. And it was close enough for home while my dad was going through chemotherapy and some things relative to his cancer treatments. And it was also in the Pac-12, Pac-10 back then.
Yeah.
And we played against fierce competition where there was the six pack, which was the teams from Arizona and Stanford, Cal, USC, and UCLA. We'd play each other. That was 30 games a season was between those teams. So it was arguably the best baseball in the country. And that was a lot of the reason why I chose to go to Arizona State.
Yeah. And so how was that as a freshman coming in?
It was a wake-up call. That's the biggest jump, going from high school to college. I was playing against, there was a couple players on our team that were married. There was one that had children. Um, and so the age range was between 18 years old and 24 year old players. And so I remember fall facing guys, that were blowing me away, and I was overmatched right when I got there. I had to quickly assimilate and learn, how to compete at that level, because I wasn't facing the same type of talent day in and day out, at the high school or club level when I was younger. So it was a wake up call, candidly. And also it was full on. I mean, Division I, Power Four conference now. And you were waking up early, typically 5:30 to 6:30, workouts, practice in the afternoon after classes, sometimes weights again if you did conditioning in the morning, and then go back home, maybe study, rinse, repeat. And it's a system.
Yeah.
And it's a very big commitment.
Yeah. And for those listening out there who might not know the history of the Pac-10, Pac-12, SEC baseball, some might say is the best today, which makes me hurt inside to say this. The Pac-10, the Pac-12 was the conference for baseball. That was it. There was no other. From top to bottom, there were, from Oregon State to Arizona State to UCLA to SC. I mean, it was on and on. Stanford, it was on and on and on. U of A, right? So you've got all that going on. Is there any point in all of this? Because it sounds like in your high school years, you're at the top of your game all the time. Is there any point in all this from a mental health standpoint you find, challenges?
No, I mean, I would say I wasn't on the top of my game all the time. I mean, baseball is the most, arguably, the most kind of nobody's at the plate with you to swing the bat. Nobody's on the mound for you to throw the ball. It is not like a field sport or a court sport where there's, a lot of teamwork and different timing and other things. Baseball is you're on an island and you need to figure it out. And whether you perform or not, it's very evident whether you performed or not. So I can think through just my career. There was just different levels of, we'll call it pressure, anxiety, that I was putting on myself to be able to perform. And a lot of that is, I think athletes inherently have high expectations of themselves, and being able to manage those expectations. I didn't really learn the mental game until I got to college and we had support, where our head coach, Pat Murphy, and he'd bring in different guest speakers to talk about the mental game and to really create what I'd consider more of a mental game plan and framework for how to be able to process the game and be able to let go of failure, be able to control the controllables, be able to have a plan that you can stick to. And what does that plan look like? And really buying into a process and a plan, realizing that you can't control the results. So that's helped me beyond the field. It's helped me in business and life. But to me, that is, I think part of the missing link right now is athletes understanding that failure is an ingredient in their development process, and being able to really buy in, trust, and fall in love with that process, and try to detach themselves, although difficult, detach themselves from the results.
Yeah, I love that quote, by the way. I'm writing it down. Failure is an ingredient in their development. I don't think you can say that any better. And again, for the parents that are listening, and we will extract this quote for sure, failure is an ingredient in their development. Do not protect them from failure. It does not help their growth and their development. So thank you for sharing that, Andrew. I think that's spot on. So
Yeah, and I think also, how do you reinforce that is you praise the effort. That focus on praising the effort,
yeah,
not on praising the results,
yeah,
not on praising the 3 for 4 with the double, not on praising the winning goal, praising just effort, and allowing the athlete to know that if they're putting in good effort, then as a parent, you're going to be, even more supportive, of them, and it's not about the results.
yeah. So back to you to kind of wrap this up, mental health wise. So, does it ever get in, I don't want to say bad, but does it ever heighten in a place in your career where you're really feeling, anxiety and all of the stress and pressure that is coming with these various levels collegiately and maybe pro ball?
Yeah, I don't think it got to the point where I was looking to maybe get medication or, talk to a doctor about it. I did work with, when I was in professional baseball, worked with our sports performance coach. That was kind of something that was part of just the organizational, we'll call it support and plan that they had in place. But we talked about this, Todd, earlier. One of the things that can happen and did happen during multiple times throughout my career is what I consider overcoaching. That's when a coach maybe gets attached to trying to help you perform better, and instills their kind of philosophy of their approach into your game and your performance style. And I had a lot of resistance to that throughout my career. And so, for instance, again, I'll use hitting as an example. When I was in professional baseball, they wanted me to hit for more power. So they said, well, what if we just teach you how to do a leg kick? That's really popular now. And, why don't you just try that? We're not worried if you don't, hit for as high an average as you've been. And what happens is, if you're not careful, athletes can start to lose their own natural just performance, movements, and style. And then that can really disrupt how the athlete feels within their body and the comfort that they have. Very difficult to perform at a high level if you don't feel relaxed and comfortable. So, and I just don't think, back then, the introduction of, just trying to do a leg kick was the right solution. Nowadays, they would
Because it's the
analyze.
popular thing. Because it's the popular thing. Like, oh
It
boy.
was
Oh boy.
Juan Gonzalez was dropping bombs, A-Rod was dropping bombs, and yeah, it was just kind of the popular thing. And let's
Yeah.
just, slap this technique onto, to every player that we can and think that that's going to work. And it's not how the game's set up.
Yeah. It's a really good point. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but for the baseball parents that are listening, I think if you look back over time, and I think I actually just saw something scrolling on Instagram. This guy calls himself the baseball stance guy. I don't know if you've seen this. And he had a collection of different, like we used to do when we were kids. You probably did it, right? Imitate. I had everybody down in my era, and he was doing
Oh,
that. And
Ken Griffey Jr.
yeah, yeah. But the
Yeah.
funny thing is everybody he was emulating, their stances were and their approaches were so screwed up, but they were all Hall of Famers. They were all Hall of Famers. Like, look at Wade Boggs. I mean, you look at Wade Boggs and you're like, what is that guy doing? Right? One of the greatest hitters of all time. Anyway, I fully digress. Listen, I want to take this opportunity and kind of we'll come back to your pro level and what that meant too, or weave it into SportsForce. But I want to transition into what all of this experience, has meant to you in creating SportsForce and, what you guys are trying to do. So give us, the summary of what SportsForce is and how this came to be and how it's evolved over time.
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned earlier, like, sports to me is the ultimate classroom for young men and young women. And the challenges around navigating the high school process to then find the right college fit, I think, is more difficult than ever before. And so what we did as a company is we started profiling athletes to understand what are college coaches looking for. And this was in every major, men's and women's sport in high school that you can think of, from baseball, football, lacrosse, soccer, volleyball, field hockey, water polo. And what it came down to was, what we learned is that families were clueless in terms of how good their son or daughter was for the next level of college, when the recruiting timeline would make sense for them, what schools to target, what camps or showcases to consider. Does it make sense to play club year round? All of those kind of decision points. And so for over a decade, we've just been guiding families through this process to make sure that ultimately they get connected to the best and the most number of schools that would be a great fit, and then make the best college decision possible. And in today's landscape, with the transfer portal, with NIL money and revenue share, and year-round clubs and tournaments and showcases, it's just a gauntlet to try to navigate and figure out, what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And so, yeah, that's, as a business, we advise families on exactly, how to navigate this process and ultimately maximize the number of potential offers that they can get. And happy to dive into, the data that's out there, on some of the difficulties around trying to find that right, recruiting opportunity in college fit as well.
Yeah. And so how much have you evolved from, you've been around how many years now?
Over 15
Yeah,
years.
which is amazing to me. I remember the early days. How much has the business evolved from what you originally set out to do? It hasn't strayed too far away, if I'm not mistaken.
It's evolved. At the beginning, it was around like profiling the athlete, getting the video, the metrics. Then we went into packaging the athlete. Then we've gone into promoting and placing the athlete. And throughout that journey, what we've found out is that colleges have particular filters and requirements of what they look for, whether they're recruiting out of high school, junior college, or the portal. And so in the new landscape that we're in right now, it's important that you're not targeting schools that are just going to be completely unrealistic based on how they might recruit out of, we'll say high school as an example. That's the core kind of audience that we deal with, is the high school to college transition.
Mm-hmm.
And so, good example, let's baseball, 6,000 plus players were in the transfer portal last summer. 6,000 college players,
Baseball.
baseball, majority Division I, looking to go to another school. Some of them will go to another D1 or D2 or D3. Some of them will go to junior college. Now extrapolate that across every sport that's out there, because the transfer portal is this new college free agency where athletes can move from school to school. And I think where athletes at the high school level get, we'll call it frustrated or disenfranchised in terms of the current system, is they see how the game's gotten older at the college level because of the portal, how less kids are, finding opportunities, especially Division I coming out of high school. And it's become later now. So for a long time, recruiting was so early. Now it's moved back and become a bit later. And so there's a lot of 2026 grads right now that are really good players, that even Division I level talent, that still don't have a home yet.
Is it fair to say, I mean, there's a lot of things that SportsForce is, but is it fair to say that today you are a major conduit between athlete slash family and schools? So,
Yes.
so that conduit is running both ways. It's not a one-way thing. You're communicating to coaches and programs, and you understand what their needs are as an organization, and are filling your pipeline with talent that is going to fit those needs, essentially. Correct?
Exactly.
So,
We have over 1,000 personal relationships with college coaches. That's baseball alone. And then we're going to start to roll out other sports later this year. And as part of all this knowledge and data and education, we're building new technology to help create that matching process between athlete and college and athlete to become much more streamlined. Because if you think about the movie Moneyball back in the day, with Brad Pitt and the Oakland A's and their run, recruiting's become way more data driven than ever before. It's also more nationwide and spread out than ever before. And the ability for athletes and parents to know what schools might be a good fit with the right data is becoming more and more possible. And so we just want to be on the forefront of that movement in terms of, how technology and data can streamline that matching process.
so in the idea of the transfer portal, and as you stated, with 6,000 players going in last year alone,
Just
it's
baseball.
yeah, just baseball, and it's completely stuffing the system for the high school athlete that's coming out. So the opportunities are not like, as you said, they're not like they used to be for the high school athlete that's coming out. In some cases, the high school ball player has got to take a step back and figure out where their first, maybe second year of playing beyond high school is going to be, and it's not necessarily going to be on the level they thought it was going to be. Correct?
It can definitely happen that way. We talked, before this about maybe setting your sights differently to where you can get a good opportunity for playing time. Now, there still is the elite, genetic lottery ticket athletes that are getting big time recruited by SEC and Power Four schools. That's still happening out of high school, but a lot less. And there's hundreds of D1s, but there's over 1,000 when you count D2, D3, NAI, and JUCO colleges that are available.
Yeah. So you're in the middle of that and you're helping guide athletes into it. What is your success rate? And here's what I'm trying to wrap my brain around. So if I'm a ball player, I'm playing in my junior year, maybe your sophomore year. I don't know how early you guys encourage this to start. My guess is the best years would be your sophomore or junior year, especially now with the transfer portal. It's not going to come as early as you stated. So your sophomore, your junior year, you're starting to do these things, i.e. SportsForce, you're creating your portal so that coaches can see video and see your stats and understand your measurements and blah, 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 blah. But you're still in a development period. So it's still an evolution of what's going on. But you're in that process, and where are you seeing with what's coming in versus, and I realize this is a long tail of a journey, because a kid coming out of high school could be hoping to get that D1 placement and scholarship when in fact they end up getting maybe a D2 placement, and they're starting, and then they're now in the transfer portal circulation if they choose to be, and they can then find their way to that D1 placement through that maturation process that occurred by playing their freshman year at a D2. I'm just using an example. So
Sure.
It's really hard where I'm kind of teeing you up on this question, because the long tail is what it is. But what is your success rate of athletes that are coming into SportsForce and using the tool and are then getting placed into a baseball program somewhere in the ecosystem?
Yeah, so over the course of our business, it's been an over 80% success rate. Now, that's for the service where we work one-on-one and hands-on with the athlete and the family, because we have to qualify that student athlete is good enough athletically and academically for us to feel very confident that we can find a good home for them. The players that choose not to play at the next level, it usually comes down to maybe they got into a school academically that was just the better fit for them, and they didn't want to go to a smaller school that allowed them to play baseball and pursue their academics. The other piece is, it does happen sometimes where players get an injury that delays or doesn't allow them to continue the game, or they're not ready to make that commitment and that jump to the next level. But for the most part, it's usually the athlete gets into, like, let's say USC or University of Texas, and there's no way they would play there on their varsity team. And they choose to, forego maybe Division II or Division III offers. Now, one thing we've talked about is the club team opportunity at a University of Texas or USC or Arizona State for club baseball or club sports at that school might still be a really good avenue for players and families to consider. And I would want more and more families to consider just that opportunity to keep the jersey on, even if it's not at the varsity level of a Division I program. Well, play club and you still build this network of other teammates and friends, and it's a good entree into starting your college career.
Yeah. Listen, I'm so glad you brought that up. And I didn't tell you this, and you're going to die when I tell you this. So I'm teaching at Arizona State, and last semester I played club baseball at the end of my career. I don't know if you remember at SMU. I played 1 year of club baseball, and I'm talking to these group of students, and they're telling me they need to get out of class early to go to baseball practice. I said, "You guys are on the baseball team?" They're like, "No. We're on the club team." I go, "What do you mean you're on the club team?" "Well, we're on the club team. We got practice, blah, blah, blah." Well, I come to find out that one kid is on, I forget what they called it. It might have been maroon and gold, or it might have been Division I and Division II. I think it was Division I and Division II. And he goes, "Oh, no, he's on Division II. He's not on Division I." I go, "What do you mean he's on Division II? What does that mean?" He goes, "Well, we have 2 club teams." I said, "You don't have 1 club team? You have 2 club teams." He's like, "Yeah, we have 2 club teams." that team's just not as good as the first team. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. And to your point, I'm so glad you brought this up, because there is a pathway for kids that are invested, and even families for that matter, that are fully invested in playing baseball in college. And just because you may not be talented enough to go play for your favorite school, fill in the blank, I don't care who it is, and you can get into the school academically, that doesn't mean that your baseball career is over, because in all likelihood, they have a club baseball team. Go try out for that team. You're still going to wear the name across your chest. By the way, in every case that I know of at SMU, we had some killer gear. I mean, it might have been better than some of the Division I teams that were out there. And I know the guys at the club baseball team at ASU, their stuff was good. I was trying to get a lid off of them because I'm sure it was damn good. But fantastic point that you bring that up. I'm sorry to harp on it. I'm just getting real excited about the club sports, because I think it's an area that we don't talk enough about. But
Yeah, I think the other thing is, for the elite athletes that are looking at potential NIL or revenue share money, in our research, that money is being spread out across more sports than you might think. And depending on the school and how they're set up, they might have different limitations on what they can do. So I'll give you an example. So there's a private school in California that's in the West Coast Conference that has no football team. So they don't get to spend all of the money, or they don't have the money that they can spend, like, let's say, a big school like Louisiana State can spend, which is 20.5 million for all their athletes. But they're able to raise money through their own donors to be able to provide some NIL money above and beyond scholarship money, to athletes. So I want to kind of play both ends of the spectrum, right? You have the club team,
yeah,
opportunity, and then for the most elite, you still need to know where, what the opportunities are, because there is money making opportunities out there for the most elite. And knowing what your value is when you're in that opportunity, as opposed to coming across, and college coaches have, blasted this process where parents are just telling college coaches what the number is. It doesn't come across well if you're not clear and researched on what is your value, what is the market that's out there and available for A, scholarships, B, potentially NIL revenue share money, as well, as you navigate this journey.
yeah. It's interesting in talking to you. I think one of the things I wrote down when you were referring to the 80% on your highest level of service, I mean, you're really vetting reality, is what it sounds like to me. You're vetting reality. And I want to use this opportunity. I've said this before on some past podcasts. For those of you who are baseball parents, I want to throw some numbers at you. And Andrew, fill in the blank or correct me where some of these have changed. In youth baseball, there are 16.7 million kids that play baseball roughly. And about 1 in 5 10-year-olds who play will make a high school baseball team. That's the reality from youth baseball, from Little League to high school. From high school to college, 12% of high school players move on to NCAA baseball. Only 2% of those or less will reach Division I baseball programs. So it's not like we're talking about this massive opportunity. And if you are listening to recruiting services or platforms that are going to give you the resources to make sure you get recruited at the school you want to go to or signed at the school you want to go to, be very careful. And I hope you're listening. And if you are looking around, give Andrew a call. And this is not a podcast for selling, but the reality is he is vetting reality. His group is going to tell you where your son fits best in the baseball ecosystem at the current moment and maybe down the road. And it's highly critical that you get this kind of education and this kind of information so that A, you're not wasting your efforts, B, you're not creating false realities of what might be, and C, you actually are working towards the goal that your son wants to meet, in particular playing baseball, or your daughter in another sport. So it's really, really important to understand what these numbers are and how much they're actually working against you. I'll throw it to you, Andrew, and let you have a thought on that.
You're spot on. And we're in a new paradigm where there's more data that's available, that's out there. There's more information and understanding. in terms of where you might fit. And this goes across almost every different sport that's out there. So if you're hoping and praying for fill in the blank University of Texas for whatever sport it might be, I'm just naming a big state school as an example. You know, maybe you don't have the time to look at their rosters and figure out, how tall their, power forward is, or their catcher is, or the numbers that metrics that those college coaches look for. And that's where we're just, not sleeping very much to be able to make sure we're continuing to get good data to understand what does that pathway look like. And that can save a lot of time and a lot of money during the process. Because I'd say overall, where families waste time and money, most arguably in this process, is chasing down exposure too early and at the wrong schools, as opposed to polishing the development and the training and the process to make sure that the athlete is ready for the moment, and then systematically trying to get recruiting exposure online, and then very strategically looking at in-person opportunities, but making sure that there's a really high chance of return on investment for your recruiting dollar. And that's not, just, you can't fly by the seat of your pants and do the, spray and pray strategy that a lot of athletes and families, or most parents, take in the current landscape that we're in.
What age do you recommend this start at, Andrew? I mean, I know in soccer and dealing with Sydney, I mean, we had kids that were, 13 years old, I think, that, we're talking to college coaches, and I think some even maybe started to get offers of some ridiculous amount. But where do you recommend that this start for parents? And, considering the fact that, in baseball in particular, their son is still in a developmental phase, boys, men, that development happens later than girls. So what you may see, even out of a high school senior, could be totally different 2 years from now when they're in college. Where do you recommend that they start this type of effort that SportsForce is in that journey of what they're doing?
Yeah, let me first frame it. So the NCAA has made some rules to limit how often and how much college coaches can communicate with student athletes at younger ages. So depending on the sport, typically it's usually the sophomore year or the summer before the junior year that a college coach will be able to start having what they refer to as legal correspondence, recruiting related legal correspondence, and communication with these athletes to let them know that they want to recruit them. Now, the college coaches are notorious for working back channels and relationships before that, but I just want to kind of, seed that recruiting has become later in a good way. Now, academically, your grades start to count and your transcript matters starting fall your freshman year. So just that's really critical, because sometimes student athletes will bomb a couple classes their freshman year. It's really difficult to raise your GPA when you have a couple C's on your transcript. But for us, our sweet spot is ideally sophomore, junior year. We do work with some families earlier than that. Usually it's just telling them what not to do and to guide their kind of training and development pathway in the right order, to make sure that they're focusing on that before they're focusing on recruiting exposure. Because if you're a parent listening in, whether you've been through the process or you're in it right now, you're probably getting hammered with camp emails, showcase emails by the dozens per month. And if you're not yet, maybe your freshman, sophomore year, you're going to in the near future, because as soon as your kid becomes part of some sort of tournament or showcase roster, then all the college coaches just start hammering families with camp and showcase invites.
Yeah, and I would tell, I don't know how it is in baseball, but that's the other thing on the camp side. There's so much hope that's put in a parent's hands with a camp invite. I'm doing air quotes for those listening. It's I again, I would come back to an organization like yours and what you do in the recruiting process that would help actually parents save money on where they should go and where they shouldn't go for camps. I mean, some camps are great. Just go get on the field, let your kids have fun. If the local university down the streets doing a camp, hey, have at it. Let them go run around and play whatever sport they're playing. But if you're going to travel across the country to go to a camp because the coach said you should come to the camp, that's a little tricky in it, because some of these camps, most of these camps are revenue sources for organizations. And I'm sure they're looking at athletes for sure, but more often than not, I've seen the real athlete they wanted to take a look at working off to the side and not in the group of all the kids that went to the camp. So I would assume you help on that end too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the explosion of recruiting advising and this industry that's now, I think post-COVID has become pretty widespread is because this is a difficult process to navigate when you haven't been through it and you have an emotional, typically unobjective view of your son or daughter, whether you're too optimistic or too pessimistic about their ability. But I think to your point, Todd, this concept around the camp showcase stuff, and this is what we preach to my staff and then the athletes that we work with, is we want to try to qualify interest before the camp, because college coaches very, very rarely will just have a player show up to a camp that they've never heard of before, and that player will be recruited, you know, for the first time, without any knowledge of them prior to the camp.
Yeah.
And college coaches will also not be upfront and honest about their intentions of you typically before the camp, because they want to get the numbers up, because it is that income source. So it does help to have an objective third party, share, hey, this camp is realistic, these camps are not. Let's focus time and energy, because every time, you do that slot machine pull to go to a camp, it's a couple $1,000
Yep.
of hotel,
Yeah.
flight, rental car, meals, camp fee.
Yeah.
Um,
So you
and
help
that's
with
what
that.
it is.
Yeah.
It's like pulling the slot in
Yeah.
Vegas and hoping you hit 3 sevens in a row.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. Hey, all right, listen, I can't believe it, but we're almost to the top of the hour, and I want to ask you one last question before we go into rapid fire. So explain to me, or explain to our parents out there, based on everything you've seen, what do parents most need to understand earlier in this process? What's the things you would absolutely tell them, pay attention to, or understand?
Yeah, I would say number one is keep the right perspective around sports. And so in going back to that earlier conversation where we said the fun, the friends, and the feedback, like keep that at the heart of how you're supporting your son or daughter with their sports interests and career. Secondly, if they start to show um, a higher level of talent in a particular sport, make sure that you have a path and a plan of how they can get supported with expert coaches, because world-class coaching, so the three kind of skill acquisition things are going to be world-class coaching, deliberate practice, so consistent deliberate practice. That doesn't mean year-round like Tiger Woods and Earl Woods, and not playing multiple sports. And the third thing is the ability to have the drive and desire, and to be able to stoke that fire that's in your child's heart for that sport. And so keeping a good, positive, encouraging, and supportive mindset as a parent is a big deal to that. And also providing some guardrails and some boundaries. If your child's saying, hey, I just want to do this sport year round all the time, and that is okay if you guys agree to that, but there needs to be some downtime and dead time for them to rejuvenate and recover physically and mentally throughout the year.
Yeah.
And then relative to the recruiting process, I would say focus on training and development first, and getting an objective assessment and evaluation of their skill level and their academic profile before you start chasing exposure.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. Listen, I can't believe we made it this fast. I told you this is like the quickest hour in sports and youth sports, the quickest hour in youth sports. We're going to have to do it again because there's so many things we didn't even touch on. I want to go into rapid fire. So let me give you some stuff here. One word or very short answers. One word to describe your youth sports experience.
One word to describe my youth sports experience. I would say,
Don't overthink it, Andrew. It's rapid fire.
I know.
First one that comes to mind.
Yeah, I would just say it was competitive.
Okay. One sport besides baseball that helped you the most.
Tennis.
Oh, okay. The age when pressure first showed up for you.
10 years old.
Oh, okay. We're going to have a whole nother episode on that one. One thing parents worry about far too early.
Being on the top club team or recruiting, interest and acknowledgement.
Okay. A moment in your youth career you think about more now than you did then. That might not be a one-word
Oh man,
answer.
you put me on the spot here. Youth career.
That's right. We'll come back to that one. That's a tough one. One misconception families have about, quote, making it in college sports.
I think that they fall in love with the brand of the school and not the fit.
Okay, great. A habit that separated athletes who thrived from those who struggled.
The ability to let go of failure.
Okay. One word you hope kids associate with sports when they're adults.
Joy.
If you have kids, for you and your wife, how have you thought about managing them when they play sports?
We've talked about this. Expose them to as many different sports, as many different inputs as possible, and let them self-organize. Kids and athletes are amazing at just self-organizing their own ability. They don't need as much coaching as we think today.
Yeah, I love that, self-organizing. And the final question that's always asked on Be Valiant, what does it mean to you to be valiant when we're talking about youth sports?
I think it's valiant to me is a combination of pursuing whatever purpose you have with values and passion is definition of being valiant to me.
Okay. Well, we did it, dude. I'm going to give you the final thought, a short final thought if you want to give it to us. Everyone, what do you think?
Yeah, final thought is the moments that your kids are in a jersey playing the sport on the field or the court or wherever it is that might be, these are fleeting moments. Maybe in another episode, I'll share kind of the story of how my dad was diagnosed with cancer when I was a senior in high school. But there were 600 games that I played in my college and professional career that he never had a chance to see. And so for parents, just to let that soak in, that finding the joy just to witness your child play the sport that they love needs to be savored, because these are fleeting moments that they're going to have a jersey on their back.
Yeah, awesome. All right, buddy. Listen, I really appreciate you being a part of the show. It's been fantastic. We're going to definitely have to do it again. Sounds like I got a commitment from you. I know I do. Maybe we'll do one live on surfboards if we can figure that out, sitting out in the waves. I appreciate it, dude. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Love what you're doing here with Valiant, and here to support the mission and the vision.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Have a good one. All right. If you found value in this conversation, share it with another parent. Please share it with an athlete. There are, in this case, baseball players that are old enough that should hear about what's going on, or even a coach. I think Andrew brings a lot of good insight that there's a lot of coaches out there that could use his knowledge. For more stories like this, as well as others, you can visit our website, playfearless.org. And also, if you want to learn more about SportsForce, you can go to sportsforce.io. Sportsforce.io. Please take a look and soak it up. And then finally, for all the parents that are in the thick of it or just starting out, remember, you're allowed to make bold, informed decisions for your child. You're allowed to walk away from the wrong team. You're allowed to demand a better culture. But most of all, you're allowed to trust your gut and lead your family that's right for you and especially for your kids. Until next time, be valiant, play fearless.